Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. It is 9:02 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. Present is Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards and Commissioner Carolina Mejia, as well as County Manager Ramiro Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and we got Rick Thomas, Matt Unzelman, and Denise Doty as well. The topic today is capital projects process improvements. The public can follow along on this meeting with our Thurston County YouTube channel, where the meeting will be live streamed, or joined by conference call at 360-252-9020. The PIN is 1234. We have 1 hour slated for this session, and I will ask the county manager to introduce the topic.
Thank you, commissioners. This is what I call a long process that perhaps we started 2 years ago, if not more, and really how we can streamline all the capital projects that we have in the county. As you may recall, during the budget process a couple of years ago, the board took an action, in fact, separating the capital component with the operational component of the budget as a whole, and also allocated funding at a project level that includes a multi-year approach, which reflects really how long a particular project could last in terms of that process. So within that context, the board approves, as your legislative authority approves a project and approves the expenditures. So the next step in the process, and even that was part of my evaluation at the end of 2019, as to how I can continue to look for ways to streamline the process, and keeping the legislative authority at the policy level and the administrative elements as to how we can move forward on those projects within the bounds of what the board has given us the authority to do so. So what you're going to be hearing today is the next step in that process. There was a lean process, a lean group they put between central services and public works to look as to ways as to how that process can be improved. And the improvements really is in time. And some of the suggestions that you're going to be hearing today is exactly to address how we can save time in delivering those projects. The board has already approved in terms of line item as well as budgetary authority. What you're going to be hearing today is not that we're going to be going beyond the bounds what the board has already approved on a yearly basis. That is not part of the conversation. So today is really how we can explore options with you and continue on. So at this point, you want to take additional comments, Robin, or right to Denise? Okay, so Denise is going to take the lead. I believe she has a PowerPoint.
Could I get a real quick question, Chair?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
You mentioned that we did this more than 2 years ago. When did we do this? Because I don't recall it. And do you know the date that this happened? Because my seatmates probably don't recall it either. If it was.
When was Robin? When was the first time that the board approved separating the capital and the operations budget? That was at 2019, I believe.
I think it was 2018. I want to say we did that 3 years ago. It might have been 2019 was the budget year that we began it. Because it would have been 19, 20, and now we're in 21.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about is the board's asking to separate the capital and the operational parts of the budget.
Was there a paper during those times? Did we have a paper that went with that decision?
We actually separated the operating and capital budgets before that. What we did 3 years ago, and yes, you were briefed on this as part of the budget process. What we did 3 years ago is we started a best practice where you do your capital budget appropriations by project rather than by fund and department the way we do the operating budget. So when you pass your capital budget, you make an appropriation for each project that you approve in that budget. We've been doing that for 3 years now. The amount of the project is flexible between the years. It's not dependent on fiscal year. It is by project. So it's a best practice in capital budgeting, and it's something that you began 3 years ago.
Would you guess there was paperwork that went along with that discussion 3 or 4 years ago?
Yes, I would indeed guess that there was paperwork. There would be minutes from your meetings.
I guess when we go that far back and then bring something up fresh, I'd kind of like to have that to refresh my memory. That's all. I'm just saying, I like to be informed about things, and my seatmates must not have known anything about it, but I have to say, I just don't remember this discussion, especially where we'd be saving, 24 to 32 weeks.
No. So,
Those kind of-
so if I may, you have not heard that. You have not heard this, the 20.
Oh, okay, that's your new
This is
justification?
today.
Okay, good
This is
enough.
today. What I'm laying out is the steps that we have taken in addressing the capital projects. So what you're going to be hearing today, this is the first time you're going to hear this proposal.
Okay,
So we're building on something that we started 3 years ago and again, we started it before that. We separated operating and capital budgets. We went with best practices in capital budgeting. Now, and we would have brought this to a year ago, but COVID delayed it. But now we're proposing to you the next step in streamlining the process.
okay, I'm not resisting it. I would like to
I'm
know,
just
I'd like to have a
helping you understand
timeline
where
even
we're at.
laid out for us that, hey, in 16, the board talked about this, in 17, they did this, and 18, we separated or whatever, just so we have some kind of a historical context to refer back to. That's all I'm asking for. I mean, we get so much information. I don't want to speak for my seatmates, but I'm maybe a little slow and need a little extra help or something. And that historical background sometimes refreshes me if I heard about it. I do not recall this, that's all. Maybe I was on the overload time.
So again,
Because you have not seen this before.
yeah, so you have not seen this before, Commissioner. This is the first time we're going to be introducing for the board's consideration.
Okay.
The separation between the capital and operational budget is just a matter of a context that I'm providing to you.
Okay, well, that's fine. Just the dates would help me, I think, if I had any prior exposure to this, that's all. No, go ahead. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Who's next?
Denise?
Jump in, Denise.
Denise, go for it.
Yep.
I'd
I'm
already
just
forgotten,
working.
sorry.
Great. I'm just working on sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So good morning, commissioners. I'm Denise Doty from the Budget Office, but today I'm with you as the facilitator of the process improvement team focused on capital project approvals. We have our 2 team members from Public Works here with us today. There's Rick Thomas and Matt Unzelman. We also had 2 team members from Central Services with us on the team. However, they no longer work for the county. So first, we'd like to give you just a sneak peek of our recommendations, and then we're going to take a step back and give you the context and take you through background and how we work through the decision making. So what we found is that by streamlining approvals, we can save between 9 to 12 weeks on a central services project and 24 to 32 weeks on a public works project that includes grant funding. Those are substantial savings that enable projects to be completed faster, providing benefits to residents, businesses, and county government. We're recommending that you consider certain delegations to the county manager in situations where approval by the board is not required. We are also recommending implementing quarterly briefings and status reports on active capital projects to provide you with more regular and greater visibility into the status of capital projects. So just to start on the background, this team was brought together for the purpose of streamlining the approvals on capital projects. But before we got started, we adopted a number of objectives. First was ensuring that we comply with state statutes and county policy. Second was that we would be streamlining the approval processes by reducing, in lean lingo, it is wait time. So in this case, it's the time between requesting to be on the agenda and actually appearing before the board. The third was ensuring that a delegation of approval does not increase the risk either to the project or to the county as a whole. The next one was aligning approvals and responsibilities for project success and compliance with state statutes and policies. And the final objective was to ensure consistency between public works and central services. Now you have in your packet a number of documents. There's a board briefing document. There are two process maps. One is the as-is, or the current process map, and the second is a recommended process map. And finally, you have a draft resolution. The final may look slightly different, but it should be pretty close to that.
All right, thank you, Denise.
Sorry, there we go.
Okay, commissioners, this is Rick Thomas, and I want to go through the basic process mapping process. And again, this is something that Denise really helped facilitate. This was done over a series of about 8 to 10 months, and we had several meetings and just kind of reiterated and refined this process as we were moving forward. If you happen to have the as-is process and the recommended process document in front of you, I know there's a lot of information there. I'm not necessarily planning to go through all of it. I just kind of wanted to lay out some of the basics to it. We first spent quite a bit of time going through the as-is process, and for major capital projects, there are basically 4 stages or 4 phases of a project. And so we broke down our kind of our evaluation into those 4. So as we would walk through this, there would be a first phase that would be our strategic planning phase. The second phase would be our project initiation or kind of pre-design phase of a project. The third phase is the design phase, which quite often also includes the permitting and the right-of-way or real estate aspects of a project. And then the fourth phase is the construction phase. Just to give a little bit of context, what we really focused on going through this kind of flow chart is the touch points that we would have with the board typically. And so as you were to look at the as-is and what's proposed, you will notice that we have blue blocks, and those cells that are highlighted in blue are points of the project where we would come before the board and give a briefing of the project at whatever various stage or process we might be. The white boxes that you see are actual points in the project where we would come to the board to get literal approval for a certain part of the process. And as Denise mentioned at the beginning, a lot of this really is focused around the grants part of the processes. So I just want to take a look at the actual flow chart with you just a little bit. You'll notice that it has the phase in the left-hand column, and then it has a description of what the actual activity or briefing or approval might be in the second. And then there is the third column is the central services impact column, and that's where we again estimated the amount of I'm going to say wait time that it would take to be able to prepare the documents and then get on the board's agenda in order to be able to actually come and present information to the board.
Hey, Rick.
And so,
Hey, Rick.
yes.
Just for the board benefits, attached to your packet is a blowout of this process that Rick is discussing with you.
Oh,
So, and this is what he's talking in detail. The PowerPoint is truncated in a way. But he provided a more detailed copy of what he's discussing, just to make sure
thank you, Romero.
You're tracking that along.
Okay. So even if you are looking at the slide and instead of the actual packet, we can kind of run through those. They are side by side there, just as an example, with the as-is process and then the recommended process. And what you're seeing on the actual slide is the phase one part. So there is an actual kind of time impact for each one of the different processes that we have there. And then we have the final column on each one of those is an opportunity for improvement. And that's where the team basically documented how a certain action could actually improve our process time. So what we actually found out when we went through this process is that we could save between 9 and 12 weeks on central service projects, and again, kind of repeating what Denise said, 24 to 32 weeks on public works projects. And again, these are projects with grant funding. And I just want to kind of, I will say, maybe remind the board about the different projects that we have. Many of our transportation projects are funded, obviously, not only with the county road funds, but they are quite often also funded with state or federal grants, such as the STP, the TIB, RAP, BRAC, HSIP. Those are maybe acronyms and grants that you've heard in the past when we've come to present. For example, in the Fish Passage Program, we are often able to take the REAP funding that the board has approved and use that to really leverage getting RCO grants. And also, just as an example, the stormwater projects, it's not uncommon for them to have at least partial funding through some ecology grants. So I guess kind of the point that I wanted to make is that the focus here really is on projects that have grants associated with them. And the big issue or the big point here is we have a lot of projects that we do that have grants. So this is a significant endeavor, and having something streamlined would really affect positively a lot of projects that we do. Okay, Denise, I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the next slide has to do with really just kind of summarizing the map, the mapping process. And before we actually get to that, I don't know if you have the packets in front of you, but I'm just going to kind of run through each one of the phases just really quickly. For example, under phase one, which is the strategic planning, that is really the steps where we are adopting the capital improvement projects budget. And again, Commissioner Edwards, this really kind of goes back to your question that Romero and Robin were addressing, and that is that our capital improvement budgets really are set. And so once we go through the CIP, we really know what our projects are that we're going to be actively working on. There weren't any real significant changes at all for the phase one between the as is and what the new process would be. Phase two is what we call our project initiation or kind of pre-designed phase. And this is the area of most projects where we are really thinking about and looking for those different grant opportunities. So there are some touch points that we would typically come to the board during this phase, but a couple of items I just want to kind of bring up. One is before we actually apply for any grants, we submit project information to the assistant county manager for her office to review to make sure that the actual grant that we're going after is something that is of value to the county. So a key component of what we're looking for in this change would be to delegate these agreements that are associated with grants so that all phases of the grant would be delegated right up front, rather than having to execute and really come back to the board multiple times every time that we needed to do a supplement agreement to the grant. And I want to kind of use that as the point to then go to phase three, because this is where the rubber kind of meets the road. In phase three, that's typically our design, our permitting, and our right-of-way phase of our project. Now, this is where there are many steps that we go through right now that by statute and regulation, we're not required to do. So this is where the real streamlining would come in. For example, under a grant agreement, there's the way that it's set up right now, there are typically individual supplemental agreements that would authorize us to use the design funds that are a part of that grant. And as of right now, we would come to the board to basically get approval to authorize that supplemental agreement. The same thing happens once we would get ready to advertise for a design consultant if we needed design consultant services that might cost over $50,000. As of right now, we'd need to come to the board to ask for approval at that point. Very similarly, when we get to the right-of-way and the real estate acquisition part of the project, we again would come back to the board if we needed to acquire acquisition consultant services that are over $50,000. Or a lot of times we have to get supplemental supplemental grant agreement for the real estate part of the project. So again, those are about 5 or 6 steps that we would normally, under our old process, or I should say existing process, come to the board to ask approval. And again, each time that we have this touch point with the board right now is about 3 to 4 weeks for us to be able to prepare the documentation and then get onto the agenda and then be able to make our presentations. So the main thought on this is, instead of coming back every time, if we get the delegation right at the very beginning of the grant process to be able to execute all of the supplements, we really are only coming to the board one time to get permission, if you will, for the main grant, and then everything else would be delegated in the normal process of our projects. And to us, it seems very reasonable because the projects are all, as Robin and Romero indicated, they're all project budgeted, and so once a project is budgeted and approved, that's the way we really proceed with the execution of our projects. And then the very last phase is phase 4 under our construction, and there are Right now, there are 6 different approval points that we have in our, what I'm going to call our pre-construction and construction phase. However, there's only a couple of them that are required by statute. So again, if we can take, 6 check-in points and reduce that down to 2, we save a couple of months easily just within that process. So kind of the bottom line in regards to our recommendations, you can see it at the bottom of the slide that's up there right now under the summary. You can see the comparison between the as-is process where we would have 15 to 20 weeks for central services under the as-is process, 36 to 48 weeks for public works. And this is really kind of the waiting time / prep time that we would need to come and either brief the board or get an approval for a next step. And so that's a significant amount of time, and it has actually led to projects sliding into a different construction cycle, if you will, maybe into the next summer or the next fall. Particularly with the construction market the way that it is and has been for a while, that can have significant impacts to our budgets just based upon the escalation of the projects. So the estimated time, if we were to look at our recommended process, it could be reduced for the central services projects down to 6 to 8 weeks, and for the public works projects, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 to 18 weeks. So really what this means is it saves us a significant amount of time on our projects, which allows us to actually get out and get the projects in place better, which is better community service, and also kind of frees up some additional time for the board for other type of work. So Denise, if you could go to the next slide.
Hey, Chair, could I interrupt just for a second?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, I have to say, I want to preface this with nobody wants to get rid of bureaucratic delay more than I do, I don't think. But you went on from phase 1, and then you talked about phase 2 and phase 3. I don't know where you're at. None of these pages are numbered or anything, but I go from phase 1 in 2 different legend areas, and then it jumps down to phase 4, and that says construction. But you were talking about phase 2 or 3, but I don't know what you were referring to on 2 or 3, Rick. I mean, you're covering this good. It's just that I need a little bit of an ability to ask questions when we don't have the information readily available, I guess. So
It's in your handout,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
he's going through this, Commissioner. As I stated earlier, this is about what he's talking. You should have that on your packet.
okay, let's see. I'm going through my material, and maybe I'm just missing a whole page. Maybe that's it. Was this available to us a couple days ago, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here.
So
So
this
all the
was,
different phases.
this was not available to us then a couple days ago?
This has been introduced today. So
This is just today.
so this is the as-is process,
Oh, okay.
and this is the proposed process.
Okay, and they're both phase 1.
And then you flip the page,
Yeah.
and then you get into phase 2 here. Phase
Okay.
2,
That's what I don't have in my packet.
phase 3,
Okay.
and phase 4 in the back.
Okay, I'm just gonna say I reviewed this material over the last couple days, and it wasn't in here. And getting it today makes it a little difficult, when it slipped in. And I think it's worth having page numbers on all this material that we get, and then have the presenter referring to that. I just want to bring up one thing. About a year or so ago, we had a split vote on the Board of County Commissioners. I believe Commissioner Mentzer and I voted to cancel some movement forward on jail. I think we were going to hire a consultant for, I don't know, another $100,000 or a couple $100,000 to move forward on a jail project that we had previously already authorized. And my question is, on that scenario, would we ever had the ability to raise our concerns and put a halt to what Commissioner Mentzer and I felt was should not have went forward and has not yet went forward. And that was a split vote between the chair and Commissioner Mentzer and I at that point in time. I don't know, Commissioner Mentzer, do you remember what I'm referring to on that?
Yes, sir, I do. I think it's a good question. I'm curious to hear the answer.
Okay, so I'm kind of wondering about how that fits in. I'm all for eliminating delay. Don't take this as I'm against something. I want whatever we're doing to work, and I want it to be beneficial for the taxpayers. So I just think rushing into this, now we're already a half hour into it, I'm kind of lost. I didn't get material early enough that, because I'm referring to material I already went over the last couple of days and made notes on, and then we get something else. Anyway, I got some questions about rushing into this.
We are not in any way suggesting that the board make a decision today. We're not rushing into anything. This is the first conversation with the board to introduce you to this proposal, and there will be additional conversations with you. So we're not looking for a decision today.
The briefing paper that I got is marked decision needed today.
Well, no, it doesn't say today. It says decision needed because eventually a decision will be required from the board to go or not go. So with all the respect, doesn't say decision needed today.
Okay, if I'm supposedly have went over this already, I do not remember it, and I feel bad for my seatmates if they keep up with it or not. They could be sharper than I am. Anyway, Commissioner Mentzer, could we get an answer maybe on that first question I asked about? How would this, give me a good, I'm referring back to a real incident. I would like to hear examples of all the different criteria that we're talking about, 36 to 48 weeks, 24 to 32, 15 to 20, and the 9 to 12, because time is money, and I'm very concerned about making sure that we cut delays wherever we can. So I want to move forward with this, but I would like to hear how would have this handled our quite complicated decision we made more than a year ago, I think it was, on a jail issue in which we had a split vote. Could I hear an answer to that? Maybe that might help.
I could, yeah. I'm happy to jump in, Commissioner. When we are looking at delegating some of the approvals, what we're hoping that we can do is that by providing routine access to status information and briefings before you, that those are touch points also that not only would give you the opportunity to provide direction or ask questions, but it's an opportunity to keep the board apprised of the status of the projects. And so if there are issues that come up, that would be opportunities. Additionally, the last recommendation we're making is that none of the delegated authority would be actually executed on projects that have particular interests by the board. And so the jail might have been a good example. So the county manager wouldn't use that delegated authority on special projects where he or she didn't keep the board up to date about the status, so that you would be well aware of when that authority would be executed.
So
Chair,
also,
could I
I mean,
comment on one thing, please?
Let me hear from Ramiro and then
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards.
maybe just adding what Denise said, the jail is a little bit different. The jail included a bonding mechanism to move forward on the project itself. It was never allocated money to do the project anyway. So it would have required to take a legislative actions to issue the bonds on that. So it's a little bit different project than what we're discussing today. What we're discussing today is those projects included, and they have already allocated funding to get us all the way to construction. The jail project, the flex unit, has been on the capital facilities plan, but the financing strategy was to eventually the board, if they want to move forward, it was the bonding element of that. And as you may recall, it was the REIT 1 that was going to be the funding source as to how you provide the bonding. So it is a little bit different. And certainly, this delegation will not apply to those because the county manager or through this delegation will not have any authority to issue bonds. It's only you. So it is a little bit different between the two projects that we're discussing.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
I have to say, I'm still in a quandary a little bit about how all this might apply. The county manager is pointing out it's not quite the same. But the way I remember that incident unfolding some time back, in which we did have a split vote, it was the chair of the board at the time and staff that were pushing hard to continue on with this project. And Commissioner Mentzer and myself said we didn't see that that was the priority we ought to be going towards. And so we had a vote that was contrary to what staff wanted and that the chair wanted at that time. So I just want to be able to make sure that we have those type of checks and balances to put into the process. So in the end, the board is ultimately the body in charge. Now, it worked out that way, but I can tell you it wasn't very smooth during that process more than a year ago, I think it was, or around a year ago, in which I think our current chair and myself had a different philosophy than the past chair or the staff. So the answer given at this point maybe is not sufficient to assure me that had this new process been in place, we might have been marching right on into an area that would have been more detrimental to the philosophy of Commissioner Mentzer and myself. So I don't know, but if you're satisfied, Commissioner Mentzer, I just, you know.
I think what you're asking, and I don't think it's been made clear, and it probably needs to, is just kind of like, where's the threshold line? I mean, we've been talking about little changes to the grant, you know, okay, we approved a project and then there's a grant and then there's little changes to the grant or whatever. I don't know what a little change to the grant versus a big change to the grant. What came up with the jail, I think, was a separate contract for a consultant, which I would imagine would not fall into this process approval that's delegated. But that's what we need to be clear about: is what would, if we adopt these recommendations, what would still come back to the board versus what wouldn't come back to the board. And it sounds like the three of us need to be crystal clear about where that line is, so we know that we still have the proper amount for our own comfort levels of oversight. over the different pieces of a project. In the jail situation, there was bonds, there was consultants. I mean, that's a huge project. Other projects might be much more routine, but there's going to be projects in the middle of complexity, and we need to be what I'm hearing is that Commissioner Edwards and I think myself, and I haven't heard from Commissioner Mejia yet, but I can't imagine she wouldn't also want perfect clarity as to where we're drawing that line.
And this is really is the purpose, if I may, of this conversation as to where the board feels comfortable in drawing the line. But I'd like to go back and to the flex unit. And at that point, staff was marching on a direction provided by the board previously. So staff doesn't have an agenda. And the staff is not bringing issues that we want to implement. We were operating under a previous direction of the board. And when we had the conversation, as Commissioner Edwards stated, it was a split vote. The board changes direction, and that's your prerogative. And the staff follows that direction. So I'd just like to provide a larger context on that. Staff was not working on a project, and all of a sudden we sprung this on the board to make a decision. That was a previous direction to continue exploring the flex unit at some point by the board. And the board changed directions, as Commissioner Edwards stated. And that's fine, that's your prerogative. And the staff follows that direction as we should.
This is Rick, if I might just reiterate a little bit from the introduction when Denise was just talking about the kind of the objectives for this. These improvements that we're talking about are to apply only to projects that have the board's budget approval from the beginning of the project all the way through the construction. Whereas with the flex unit, if I can recall, and I wasn't directly involved in that, but that project had specifically been set up to fund it on a phase-by-phase basis, and there wasn't any approval for an entire project from the very beginning through the end of construction.
That's not quite accurate. The CIP did include funding for the entire flex unit project, but it was bond-based.
Right.
So, the money wasn't in the bank. And that was the thing, that was a big part of the reason that we didn't go forward. And as Commissioner Edwards stated, there was a change of direction. And what the process before you today includes, if we could finish the presentation, is regular reports to the board on capital projects and a proposed resolution that includes a clause that says that the county manager is directed to assure the board is briefed on capital projects of special interest. And a jail project is absolutely a project of special interest. So there is no way we would have gone forward without the board's approval at any stage of the jail.
Okay, so let's hold any more questions until we finish the formal presentation. Go ahead, I don't know who's next, but let's get that done. It's 9:46.
Yeah. So I'll just continue then. This is Rick, and it won't take too long to get through the rest of these. It's just kind of a recap. So what you have in front of you right now is a slide that's talking about the reducing the project delays and what those benefits are. And I won't read them word for word, but we have the beneficiaries of our residents and our businesses and our actual employees. The improvements that we're talking about basically just allows us to get our projects done faster. And many of the projects we do primarily in transportation or utilities and stormwater have a direct impact on our citizens. And the sooner we get them done, the better service we have for them. As far as the benefits for the Board of County Commissioners, We would have routine status updates on all of our active projects. Many of these different items would be able to be delegated to the county manager, still with the responsibility and accountability for the success of the projects and making sure the board is included in the decision-making process. Maybe most importantly for the board, this would reduce the amount of repetitive meetings, and it would allow more time for meetings for other types of business. For our contractors and for the different departments, again, it just allows more predictability with scheduling people and getting equipment to projects. It allows the contractors project closeout and final payment and retention work to be done quicker. It allows us to get onto our projects faster and that will reduce our risk of cost escalations and allow us the ability to stay within our budgets. And it also will reduce the time for central services and public works in the preparation time that we need to get materials ready to prepare for the board. And then Denise, you can go, there we go. So here are the recommendations again, just really quickly. And this is an outline of what's actually in the resolution that Robin was just talking about. We would provide quarterly briefings and status reports on all of our active projects. And that would be for both public works and for central services. We delegate the advertising of consultants for different services that we might need to the county manager or the designee. We would delegate the awarding of consultant contracts that are $50,000 or greater to the county manager or the designee. We delegate the advertising for sealed bids to the county manager. We delegate the final contract acceptance for central service projects to the county manager. This is something, just as a note, that Public Works already does. So this would just bring Public Works and central services in alignment with the process. And then as Robin was mentioning, there is that obligation of the county manager to keep the board basically involved in any delegated actions on special projects, or if there's any special interest that comes up on a project, to most certainly make sure the board is involved in the discussion. And then I think, Denise, you just had a closing slide.
Yeah, and could I just mention on the recommendations that we aren't changing the requirement that central services and public works. So for instance, if we're delegating advertising, all the statutory requirements about advertising are still there and expected to be followed. It's just coming to the board to authorize the advertising. So we're still expecting compliance there. With that, I'll go on to the last slide. So as far as next steps go, I guess first would be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
I have.
Commissioner Edwards?
Hold on.
Sorry.
I would just like to ask Commissioner Mejia. I haven't heard from her, and I wanted to make sure she's gotten a chance to ask any questions first.
I don't have any questions at this point, but I just want to, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just want to relay my frustration at receiving some documents, this morning coming to this meeting. I had also read the slides yesterday, and then I'm surprised that there are more documents today, and I'm trying to read the documents while also listening to the presentation. And I have to let this, just try to take it all in and write my questions down, because at this time I don't feel prepared.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards.
I guess I'm going to say ditto to my seatmates' concerns, but I would like to move on to the recommendations side of this. And I'll just refer to number 3 on recommendations: delegate awarding consultant contracts that are $50,000 or greater to the county manager or designee. Now, referring back to that jail issue about a year ago, we may not have heard about that. And that might have just moved forward, because I remember there was a big push about a time frame and all that. And we have to remember that all of our staff people come and go. And then we're going to have new people in new positions, and we need to have it designed so it will work. And then we go down to number 6, and the county manager to brief the board prior to any of the above delegated actions on any projects of special interest. Well, being briefed on something that's moving along is not the same as taking a vote on it. Again, I refer back to that jail project, and I don't think we would have probably had that discussion and vote at that particular time. Something would have kept moving forward that a couple of the board members were not comfortable with. So I'm all for continuing trying to come up with streamlining our system. I don't want that looked at that I'm not in favor of that. I am very much in favor of that. I think that as we get presentations, we need to be able to ask questions as the presentation is given to us. I do think having the information ahead of time is paramount, especially on these very complicated issues, so that we can make notes and refer to, and then page numbers. You've heard me harp about page numbers for years now, to make sure that all of our presentations have page numbers so we can flip immediately when somebody says, well, I'm on page 4, we can flip right to it, and we can refer to it. We get so much information through the Board of Commissioners that it's hard to separate out. Well, we talked about this 6 months ago, or whenever it was. So I want to move forward with this. I'm very interested in it, but we need to have a little bit of a slowed down process and make sure we get the information before we have the discussions, because as Commissioner he has said, I'm trying to follow, make notes. I don't have that portion, and it just disjoints the presentation, and I think it's a disservice to the hard work that our staff does sometimes if it isn't coordinated before we get it. That's all.
Yes, and just to add on that, I'm not,
You have your microphone.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, Will.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to add on that, I'm all for streamlining the process, especially for staff, but I just do not feel prepared at this time, just with, the processes that are outlined over there. I would like to just really review them before, and maybe have another session where I can ask questions, or maybe this will be something that me and Ramiro can discuss. But at this time, I just.
No, that's all fair statements. And yeah, certainly information needs to be provided to you ahead of time. That is on me. I will continue to work on that. And that's really what we're looking from the board today to the next steps. Is this a no-go? That's fine based on the information provided, or is something you'd like to continue to explore? And what additional information will you need for staff to come back at a different briefing? Because, and again, this is the first introduction to the concept. I was not expecting you to say, okay, bring this AIS for next Tuesday. That's not the intent. Introduce them to the concept, good questions by the board. Where do you like to put the threshold? All that is up to really you as to the next step, if this concept is something you'd like to further explore. So
I can just say that there's pieces in here that I know I support, like the delegating the advertising, sealed bids and things like that, that just routine stuff that comes before the board that absolutely doesn't need to. Whether I'm comfortable with the whole thing, I'm not 100% sure, because consultant contracts over 50,000, that's something I need to think about. It sounds like the board all of us are in agreement to think about that one, but I would say some permutation of this is a good, would be a valuable process improvement. Half of it, all of it, most of it, I'm not sure, but I personally, I'm not saying it's a no-go because I see elements of this that I kind of wondered. I think we've all questioned in the past, why is this coming before the board? You know, there's little things, but we're just worried about those big things. And I think that's valid. I saw somebody's hand. Robin. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hey, Denise, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's harder for me to see everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we'll bring forward for the next conversation about this is the current procurement policy where the board has delegated already for public works contracts. Contracts under 250,000 have been delegated already to a department director or elected official by policy. So the proposal that I think is part of this is where in practice, one of your departments was still bringing things to the board that had essentially already been delegated. So I will also have for you a copy of our current procurement policy that, and will highlight the parts that would be changing.
And also what I hear is that I think Commissioner Edwards would like to have an example of a project. Is that correct, Commissioner?
Well, I thought.
To go through a process?
Yes,
okay.
On the breakdown of the different weeks that are laid out on the first part of that AIS presentation is examples to go along with that really bring clarity to what you're really referring to, because we don't deal in that stuff. You guys do all the time, but I don't think we as a board can follow along without having an example or two thrown in there that this is how we can save this.
Yeah, that's
this would speed this up.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. We can probably, Rick can probably lay out a project that we have processed under the current process in the same project if under the proposal in terms of timelines. Anything else that Commissioner Mejia would like for the next briefing?
No, I agree with just second on what Commissioner Edwards said. Some examples would be great. That way, at least we understand a little bit more and how we can help staff. Thank you all for the presentation.
So we'll organize an upcoming meeting. What I have is getting to the point of bringing the procurement policy and how those two align with this proposal. We'll bring examples of projects as to how a project has gone through within the existing process versus the proposed process and where the timeline savings will be. We'll make sure that we provide you the information ahead of time so you have the opportunity to review and follow along on the process. And also I may ask the board to start thinking, you know, where do you like to, where do you feel comfortable in setting that, as Commissioner Minster stated, where is that threshold? What is that, the comfortable line that you feel comfortable? This is just a proposal from staff, but certainly you're the ones who need to give us direction on that. So I will encourage the board members to think on those terms if this is something you'd like to continue on as to what will be that, that threshold. Attached to the packet also is a copy of the resolution. If you like to add additional language, put a little more restrictions on your delegation, this really is all that is for you to review and provide comments and feedback.
Could I just comment on one thing, just real quick? I guess the members that are presenting this, and so all the staff that are involved in this, have kind of heard the concerns of the commissioners, and I think I would appreciate it if they would adjust that information or presentation to kind of reflect what our concerns were, rather than have us trying to come up with notes to change this or change that.
No, I'm not looking for you, but give us feedback in terms of where you feel comfortable on the policy level.
Well, okay, but I mean, you've heard us, you've heard our concerns. Maybe we could just, when we get a new presentation, maybe have some adjustment in there to address that, or at least some topics of discussion.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Robin?
I'm very sorry. I do apologize. I thought I was paying attention, but I did not hear any specific things that the board is asking us to incorporate into this policy. I heard very general concerns. And one of the things that we need to discuss is what are the bright lines? And I think looking at the procurement policy will assist with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's 10:03. We have a briefing that was scheduled for 10. We will convene at 10:10 for that, so that we have a quick break. And that will be on a different topic, but thank you to staff that are here for this.
In a different Zoom as well. Thank you.
Different Zoom. All right, thank you. We're adjourned.
Thanks, everyone. Good job, people.